Is capitalism a Catholic invention? Also, Florida is having a Second Amendment summer. Is this a good thing? We discuss all this and more on episode 7 of Trad Takes. Welcome to episode 7 of Trad Takes, hosted by the Traditionalists. I'm Eric Kosovich, and thank you for joining me this week. Please like this video, and don't forget to leave a comment. And if I can ask you, dear listeners, when you leave a comment with an interesting topic that you'd like to hear me discuss, or a question, whether it's something random or something that you've heard on one of the Trad Takes episodes. This makes it much easier for me to respond with meaningful thoughts. Finally, consider subscribing to the Traditionalists and do make sure to ring that bell. Before we get any further, I wanted to make a quick announcement for our Spanish-speaking listeners. No entiendo español. Estoy haciendo esto para trolear a mis oyentes. Si entiendes lo que digo, felicidades y gracias. Okay, now that that's out of the way, before we get to my favorite comment of the day, I need to clear something up. Father Geckel has mistakenly stated that I admitted Ohio is better than Colorado. I hope this was an accidental mistake, a slip of Father's mind. Although part of me wonders if this is an intentional misrepresenting of my words, which unfortunately would not be something foreign to someone who comes from Ohio. That said, I will be gracious and assume that it was a mistake. There are several problems with the Good Father's statement that I conceded that Ohio is better than Colorado. First, and most obvious, the statement is blatantly false, dare I say, patently absurd. Something I never would have conceded due to its obvious falseness. Secondly, the concession, if you can call it that, was that the current politics of Ohio are better than the current politics of Colorado. I think this is fairly obvious to anyone listening. J.D. Vance is an excellent politician, and Colorado will likely not put out someone like him or of his caliber for many, many years, if ever. Colorado is obviously very blue, and our right wing is probably most known for Lauren Boebert, not exactly a principled or even a sane conservative. So yes, Ohio is currently better than Colorado politically. Father even brought up Arkansas, that he likes Arkansas better than Ohio, which is interesting. I agree, Arkansas is also better than Colorado is politically. But the point that almost seems too obvious to make, politics is only one small factor in judging a state. To make this point clear, I've compiled a list, a much shorter list than I could have compiled, I might add, but I've compiled a list to better compare these states. First of all, size. Colorado is the 8th largest state by land area in the Union, at 104,000 square miles. Where do Ohio and Arkansas land? Ohio is 34th at 45,000 square miles, and Arkansas is 29th at 53,000 square miles. Yes, if you do the math, this means that Colorado is larger in geographical area than both Ohio and Arkansas combined. An obvious win there. Population density is next. Colorado has 57 people per square mile. Arkansas, to be fair, is pretty close, but it still has more people per square mile at 59, and Ohio is a ridiculous 288 people per square mile. The whole state might as well be a gross, nasty city. Next, we have average state elevation. Colorado is number 1 in the Union. Its average elevation is 6,800 feet above sea level. That happens to be the exact elevation I live at. Interesting. But number 1, you got that, Father? Ohio is way down the list in the 30s at an average of 850 feet above sea level. Not even in the thousands, it's in the hundreds. And Arkansas is even worse at 650. Why does this matter? It's huge. First of all, it limits the amount of bugs we have here. We get very few mosquitoes, ticks, and other such nasty creatures, in large part due to the elevation. Number two, it makes you stronger. When I travel to sea level or normal elevations anyway, I can just run and never get tired. And I'm not a small dude. But my body has been so fine-tuned by living and exercising at 6,800 feet that my body has gotten used to much less oxygen. I'm basically Superman at sea level. The same goes for drinking. Drinking 2 beers here in Colorado is like drinking 4 at sea level. The U.S. Olympic Training Center is located here for that very reason, the lack of oxygen. Third, stars are clear here because we have much less atmosphere in the way before we get to the outer space. There's so many reasons why elevation is good, and Colorado is obviously king there. Next, we have high point. Colorado has the 3rd highest high point in the Union at 14,440 feet above sea level. Arkansas's high point is 2,753, which is lower than Colorado's lowest point. Unbelievable. Ohio is even worse, with its high point being 1,548 feet above sea level. In the words of President Trump, sad. I could go on and on and on. Per capita average income, Colorado blows away the other 2 states. Average days per year of sunshine, Colorado again blows away the other 2. Number of traditional Catholic parishes, Colorado blows away the other 2. Number of rivers that begin in the state, Colorado is called the mother of rivers. The list is endless. So, all that to be said, for the record, officially, I have never and likely will never admit that Ohio or Arkansas is better than Colorado. That statement would be patently absurd. And Father, while I do appreciate your love of these states, and while I appreciate the politics-colored glasses with which you judge them, I would like to say with all due respect, and I do have very much respect for you, Father, Colorado is best, and it's not even close. In all seriousness, all of you listening here, if you haven't already, do go listen to Father's podcast. Outside of his mistaken views on state rankings, it's excellent. And I especially enjoyed his explanation of why being a black pillar is bad. That's Fridays with Father Gecko. Do check it out. All right, running a bit behind schedule here. Let's get to our favorite comment from last week's video. Empty Seat 48, I like that name, very subtle, says, "Thanks for the show. What are your thoughts on the Daily Wire? Is it a good news source worth listening to for Catholics?" It's an interesting question. If you're looking for a blanket, are they good or are they bad statement, then I think I would lean towards saying, yeah, the Daily Wire is good. It's fine. Obviously, they are right-wing. They understand that the battle is not simply rhetorical, but also cultural. And I think that puts them above Fox News. And much of their content goes deeper than simply scoring political points. On the negative side, they can be crass and a bit naughty, but of course, who isn't? And they also are sort of a little ecumenist, at least not all of the hosts, but some of them. I know some people have a problem with Ben Shapiro being Jewish, but for me, that's not really that much different than Jeremy Boring being a Protestant. They tend to be a little bit weak on the social side, cultural side for the gay lifestyle, but they were a leading or maybe even the leading voice against the trans stuff too, so I have to give them kudos there. In some ways, the traditionalists, our channel is similar in structure to the Daily Wire. We're obviously not in it as a money-making venture, and therefore we're not likely to get as big. But like them, we do have a plethora of hosts that tend to have very different opinions about the world and how it works. However, well, they are all brought together, quote unquote, by a rough shared political and social view. The traditionalists, we are brought together by the unity of faith and the Catholic Church, so we obviously have the advantage there. As far as hosts go, they've got some good and some bad. Obviously, they don't have Brett Cooper or Candace Owens anymore, but I don't particularly miss either of them. The two I like the best are Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh, who are both traditionalist Catholic, which is an interesting thing for a conservative company started by a Jew and a Protestant. It is interesting that they give this platform to two very outspoken Catholics and traditionalist-leaning Catholics. Particularly Michael Knowles. He's very eloquent on theology, and I'd say probably one of the more persuasive pro-Catholic talking heads out there. And then Walsh is just funny. Shapiro's fine. He's a little annoying. I don't mind him as much as some people do. But I do think I have to give him kudos for being probably one of the most convincing and persuasive debaters on the subject of pro-life. He's really good at that. Boring's a little off-putting to me. Jordan Peterson is an interesting one. He's such a brilliant and interesting guy. But he's also someone who seems to be intent on running away from the fundamental truth of God's existence. If ever the Hound of Heaven was after someone, it seems to be Peterson, and he's doing his best to flee. The good news on his side is that his wife, Tammy, recently converted to Catholicism, and apparently Jordan prays the rosary with her. He's also not shy about bringing up the importance of Mary in Christianity, so again, definitely hope there. I just wish, I would really love it if he could talk to or interview a true traditional Roman Catholic priest instead of these characters like Bishop Barron. I do think he sees through the ecumenism that comes out of the Vatican, and I suspect that that is part of the reason he has not converted himself. Anyway, that went off the rails there. Back to the original question. I do think that the Daily Wire does good work. Politically, I appreciate that they platform different viewpoints and that those individuals that disagree with each other are not kicked off. I think the Daily Wire is what a real coalition looks like. I always get nervous, and I think we all should get nervous, seeing a political party or a political group just march in absolute lockstep. History, particularly the history of the 20th century, has given us enough examples of what goes wrong in the world when a party or group gains too much power and then demands total and complete agreement to it. So, all that is to say, the Daily Wire isn't perfect. But what is? I would argue not even the traditionalists are perfect. Thank you for the comment, empty seat. Before we get on to the topic of Catholic capitalism, wanted to hit a couple of quick news stories here. The first one I was really excited to see, but headline is Ron DeSantis proposes a Second Amendment summer. This Second Amendment summer would consist of the elimination of sales tax on guns and ammo from Memorial Day to Labor Day in the state of Florida. So I've only been to Florida once. It was a beautiful state. It was a great trip, but I quickly determined that I will never be able to live there. As I discussed in my first segment, I currently live at 6,800 feet, and the high point in Florida, Britton Hill, is 345 feet above sea level. When your state's highest point is a hill and not a mountain, that is a problem. And the other reason I couldn't live there is it's just too flippin' hot. I was there in May, not even the hot season, and I wanted to die from heat exhaustion and oppressive humidity. So as much as I love the politics and the governor, I will never be able to live there. But I never felt particularly sad about not being able to live in Florida until I saw this news article. A governor promoting the citizens of his state to exercise their Second Amendment rights, promoting and even encouraging them through elimination of sales tax, is just something that warms the cockles of my heart. I think it's a wonderful idea. I did look into it. It does only apply to residents of Florida. But so if there are any listeners from Florida who are residents of Florida, please comment and let me know. Is this something that you like? Is this something that you dislike? If it's something that you like, is it a benefit that you will take advantage of? Let me know. My take from this story, my takeaway, is that what could be a better sign of a more healthy governmental system? As the governor, the leader of a group of people who was elected, is promoting the people's right to defend themselves against the very government that he works in. That mentality is very much the same mentality that the Founding Fathers had. The Founding Fathers could have been kings. George Washington very easily could have been elected a king, become a king, and then America would have quickly devolved into all the other type of states that having a single powerful ruler tend to devolve into, unless, of course, that ruler is Catholic. But what made the Founding Fathers so unique, and what made America so unique as a country, was that the leaders, when they had the power, intentionally built the system to restrain that very power that they had. And I will give Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida major kudos to continue in that tradition. I personally will never complain if a politician or politicians remind me of the Founding Fathers in their ways of thinking or their policies. So I don't know if this, again, puts Ron DeSantis ahead of J.D. Vance in my estimation, but it certainly doesn't hurt his cause. All right, feel like I don't need to talk too much about Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. getting confirmed to their cabinet positions that they were nominated for. I will say they were two of Trump's more controversial cabinet picks. And not only controversial in the media, but controversial in my mind, in that I would struggle to vote for either of them if I were in the Senate. And apparently they did have a lot of trouble getting through, and that there were a lot of backroom promises made, particularly through J.D. Vance, about the two picks and how they will operate their departments. I've spoken at length about RFK. I don't trust him as far as I could throw him. I think putting someone who is a lifelong Democrat, not only a lifelong Democrat, a third-generation Democrat, in a place where we think he's going to drain the swamp is sort of foolish. Now, I like the fact that he joined Trump's coalition. I think he actually helped Trump get elected. I think Trump would have gotten elected without RFK, but it certainly didn't hurt his cause to have him there. It's just I don't think that the Director of Health and Human Services is a good place for someone who, to this day, believes that abortion should be legal up until the point of birth. But anyway, not my decision to make. The Senate did confirm him, so now he's there. And I hope that he does some good things and minimizes the bad things. Tulsi Gabbard being confirmed as Director of National Intelligence is a better fit for me, I think. Makes me a little bit nervous, again, the lifelong Democrat thing, but from what I've seen of her, she does seem to be earnest about loving the country. I'm a fan of a very transparent national intelligence agency. There are things that are going to have to be kept secret. If all of the country's secrets are exposed, then that leaves us in danger of being exploited by foreign powers. But at the same time, the intelligence agencies have been so deceptive and so sketchy, right? You look at the memo the FBI put out against these radical traditionalist Catholics as being dangerous to society. Obviously, the pendulum is now swinging back the other way. And Tulsi might be a little bit farther back than I'm comfortable with, but I do think it's necessary to rebalance those departments. And I don't think it's the worst thing for her to be the Director of National Intelligence. Again, I hope she does well. And both her and RFK getting through the Senate confirmations, along with Pete Hegseth also, goes to show you how unified the Republican Party is behind Trump and his picks. Again, there's good and bad to that. The good is that it looks like they're actually getting things done. You look at Doge and that type of effort. The bad, and I don't know if I would call it bad at this point, but something that we should be keeping our eyes open for, is making sure that this party, even though it currently appears to be doing all the right things, does not get out of control in its power and does not start taking advantage of that power in a negative way. That sound means we once again are in the Interesting Read segment. This is where I discuss something that I've been reading so that you don't have to do any reading if you don't want to. Although I really, really think you should. As with the last time, the book I'm reading is called Bearing False Witness by Rodney Stark. And the topic that struck me, and I think I want to talk about a little bit today, is capitalism. Now, capitalism is something that has sort of a dirty connotation, I think, with a lot of traditionalists. And to be honest, I think the main reason that it has that dirty connotation is because we don't have a well-established definition of capitalism. So I can say capitalism, and some people might think, well, simply a free market economy, right? Limited regulation, exchange of goods and services. But someone else might hear capitalism and think of giant corporations in bed with federal and state governments, just trying to maximize profit and drive competitors out of business. What is capitalism? So that's something that this book actually does a pretty good job of doing, which is before it starts defending capitalism from the church's historical perspective, it actually defines it. So I'm just going to read from this book. Capitalism is an economic system wherein privately owned, relatively well-organized and stable firms pursue complex commercial activities within a relatively free, unregulated market, taking a systematic, long-term approach to investing and reinvesting wealth in productive activities involving a hired workforce, guided by anticipated and actual returns. A lot of fancy words there, but some of the stick-out points for me, right? Complex commercial activities. That's things such as transactions, right? Having a system of money that does not involve everyone who's in the system to have chickens or goats to trade the other person for. The term systematic, mathematically based accounting practices, for example. A big one is privately owned. The firms we're talking about here are not parts of the government or arms or wings of the government. They are private individuals leading these corporations for the purpose of providing goods or services and making a profit while doing so. The error that Mr. Stark is trying to address in this chapter is the error that capitalism was fundamentally a Protestant invention and that it happened post-Reformation. And so here I'm quoting both the author as well as the historians that he's quoting in his book. The idea that large-scale industrial capitalism was ideologically impossible before the Reformation is exploded by the simple fact that it existed. All historians have opposed this tenuous theory of the Protestant ethic, although they have not managed to be rid of it once and for all. Yet it is clearly false. The northern countries took over the place that earlier had been so long and brilliantly occupied by the old capitalist centers of the Mediterranean. They invented nothing, either in technology or business management. Moreover, during their critical period of economic development, these northern centers of capitalism were Catholic, not Protestant. The Reformation still lay well into the future. In fact, capitalism was a very Catholic invention. It first appeared in the great Catholic monastic estates way back in the 9th century. And he goes back a little farther to what St. Augustine taught. He taught that wickedness was not inherent in commerce, but that, as with any occupation, it was up to the individual to live righteously. St. Augustine also ruled that price was not simply a function of the seller's costs, but also of the buyer's desire for the item sold. In this way, St. Augustine gave legitimacy, not merely to merchants, but to the eventual deep involvement of the church in the birth of capitalism. That's interesting. St. Augustine is basically agreeing with the law of supply and demand. Because of the immense increases in agricultural productivity that resulted from significant innovations, such as the switch to horses, the heavy moldboard plow, and the three-field system, the monastic estates were no longer limited to mere subsistence agriculture, meaning they were no longer limited to simply providing the food for themselves that their own monastery needed. They were able to produce more food than they needed, and therefore able to give or sell the extra food that they produced to others. Instead, each monastery began to specialize in particular crops or products, and to sell these at a profit, allowing them to purchase their other needs, which led them to initiate a cash economy. So you can imagine a bunch of different monasteries, right? Monastery A is growing potatoes. Monastery B is shearing sheep. And instead of having each monastery do all of these things poorly, the sheep monastery does a really good job at it, can do it very quickly. And in turn, they don't have to be planting potatoes. So maybe their monastery can be smaller in size, right? It's just basic, fundamental capitalism. A second development was a shift from a barter to a cash economy. It simply was too complicated and unwieldy for a wine-making estate, say, to barter for its other needs, transporting goods hither and yon. It proved far more efficient to sell its wine for cash, and then buy whatever was needed from the most convenient and economical sources. Beginning in the late 9th century, the reliance on cash spread rapidly. Perhaps the monks in Lucca, near Florence, were the first to adopt a cash economy, but it was well established across Europe, when in 1247 a Franciscan chronicler wrote of his order's estate in Burgundy, that the monks, quote, do not sow or reap, nor do they store anything in barns, but they send wine to Paris, because they have a river right at hand that goes to Paris, and they sell for a good price, from which they get all their food and all of the clothes they wear. So very cool. My take on this, as with most things, is a sort of balanced approach. We know that today's capitalism, or when we say capitalism, tends to include a lot of baggage from what I would consider corporatism. Like I was previously saying in the segment, the large companies, soulless, only profit-seeking, often in bed with governments or other types of powers. But the fundamental basis of capitalism, which is a free market economy following the laws of supply and demand, that's a good thing, and that has been a good thing, and it helps us as traditionalists to see the history of this and how it came about, seeing that it was organic and that it was done by, in general, good and holy people and monasteries. So let's not become iconoclastic about capitalism and say, oh, it's a terrible system. Sure, bad things have come out of it and bad people get rich because of it. But show me a system that does not have these abuses. Show me a system that works better. and you will not find one. That sound means we're all out of time for today. Please like, share, and subscribe to The Traditionalists, and don't forget to ring that bell. And spread the word whether for my show Trad Takes or for any of the other shows hosted by The Traditionalists. Remember to leave a comment. It might well be the one I pick to read and react to next week. This is Eric signing off. God bless you all, and God bless these United States of America.